"Invite her to my jet," the Mafia boss ordered after seeing her waiting alone at the airport. The rain against the towering windows of the private terminal was a merciless, drumming gray. It was the only sound in the lounge, save for the whisper of her own breathing, which kept catching in her throat. Lily Hart sat in a chair designed for comfort, but she was rigid with a misery so total it felt like ice in her veins. She had been crying for hours, and now the tears just leaked, hot and silent, tracking down her cold cheeks. Her world had ended at 9 o'clock this morning. First came the eviction notice, a fluorescent orange sticker on the door of the apartment she had shared with her mother. Then came the call from the lawyer, a man with a voice like gravel, informing her that the small inheritance her mother had left, the money Lily was counting on to survive, had been absorbed by previously undisclosed debts, all managed by a distant uncle she barely knew. She had been swindled and she had been evicted, all in the span of 3 hours. She clutched the two things she had managed to grab, a small, worn canvas duffel bag and a framed photograph of her mother. The woman in the photo was smiling, vibrant and alive. Looking at it just started the tears again. Lily had used the last of her cash on a one-way ticket to Denver, for no other reason than it was cheap and it was not Chicago. And now, that flight was canceled. A storm front had stalled over the Midwest, grounding everything. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. She was 22 years old, and she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. She was so consumed by her own despair that she didn't notice the shift in the room's atmosphere. Matteo Romano noticed her. He moved through the terminal not like a passenger, but like an owner. He was a tall man, made taller by the immaculate cut of his black suit, a darkness so profound it seemed to drink the light from the room. His shirt was black, his tie was black, and his shoes, Italian leather, made no sound on the plush carpet. He was flanked by two men, built like stone monuments, who mirrored his silence. Matteo was on his way to Miami for business. He was thinking about a shipment, a problematic associate, and the unsatisfying taste of his morning espresso. Then his eyes snagged on her, a small, shivering thing in the corner, clutching a picture frame like a life raft. She was a stain of vibrant, messy grief in his sterile, controlled world. He frowned, annoyed by the distraction. One of his men, Marco, leaned in. "Sir, we're ready for departure." Matteo's gaze didn't move from the girl. "Find out," he said, his voice a low rumble. Marco didn't need to ask what he meant. He walked to the private concierge desk, spoke in a voice too low for Lily to hear, and returned in less than a minute. "Her name is Lily Hart. She's been here for 7 hours. Her flight to Denver was canceled. Looks like all commercial flights are grounded until tomorrow." Matteo watched her wipe her face with the sleeve of a thin, damp jacket. She looked exhausted, like a bird with a broken wing. He had seen real suffering, seen death, seen violence. This was different. This was the quiet disintegration of a life, and it repulsed him. And yet, it was an impulse, a flicker of something he didn't recognize, a disruption in the day's cold logic. "Invite her to my jet," Matteo ordered. Marco blinked, just once. "Sir, we are going to Miami. She is stranded. Invite her." Marco, ever the professional, simply inclined his head. "Yes, sir." Lily looked up when the large man in the suit approached her. She flinched, pulling her bag closer. He stopped a respectful distance away. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice polite but firm. "My employer, Mr. Romano, is departing for Miami. He would like to offer you a seat on his aircraft." Lily's tear-fogged brain struggled to process the words. She looked past the man to the dark figure standing near the boarding gate, watching her. He was terrifying. "What? No, thank you. I'm waiting for my flight." "Your flight has been canceled, miss," Marco said, his tone unchanging. "The airport is closing. You have nowhere to wait." The finality of it hit her. Nowhere to wait. He was right. Security would sweep the terminal soon. She would be forced out into the rain with $43 and a photograph. She looked back at the man by the gate. He hadn't moved. He wasn't beckoning, wasn't smiling. He was just watching. I can't, she whispered. At that, Matteo moved. He walked toward her, and the air crackled with his approach. His bodyguards tensed, but he raised a hand, and they settled. He stopped 5 feet from her, close enough for her to smell the expensive, clean scent of his clothes, sandalwood and something sharp, like ozone. "Miss Hart," he said. His voice was deeper than his bodyguards, a smooth baritone that vibrated in the air. "I am leaving. You are staying. This seems like an inefficient arrangement." She looked up into his face. He was not handsome in the way of movie stars. His features were too harsh, his nose aquiline, his jaw set, but his eyes, they were the color of dark roast coffee, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. "Why?" she managed. Matteo almost smiled. It was the faintest lift at the corner of his mouth. "I don't know." The honesty of that, more than anything else, broke her resistance. She was too tired to fight, too cold to be proud. She looked at her mother's picture, then back at him. "I don't have any money." "I am aware of that," he said. "We are leaving now." It wasn't a question. He turned and walked away, expecting her to follow. After a long, agonizing second, Lily grabbed the strap of her duffel, pulled her mother's photo to her chest, and followed him onto the tarmac. The jet was not just a plane, it was a penthouse in the sky. The cabin was a whisper of cream leather and polished mahogany. A single flight attendant, a woman with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, greeted them. "Mr. Romano," she said, taking his coat. "Elena, we have a guest." Elena's eyes flickered to Lily, her damp clothes, her red-rimmed eyes, the cheap canvas bag, but her expression remained one of serene professionalism. "Of course, sir. Welcome aboard, Miss—" Lily felt like a stray dog in a palace. She hovered near the entryway, unsure of where to sit, where to even look. "Sit," Matteo commanded, gesturing to a plush armchair. He himself took a seat opposite, shedding his suit jacket to reveal a crisp black shirt and the unexpected, alarming sight of suspenders. He opened a laptop, and in an instant he was absorbed, his focus absolute. Lily sank into the leather. It sighed under her weight. The engines hummed, and soon they were taxiing, the plane moving with a smoothness that felt impossible. Elena appeared at her elbow. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea? We have a full bar. Just water. Please, thank you." Elena returned with a crystal glass of water on a small silver tray. Lily took it, her hand shaking slightly. They were in the air for an hour before he spoke again. He hadn't looked up from his computer. "You were going to Denver," he stated. Lily jumped. "Yes, but it didn't matter. It was just a place to go." This time, his head did lift. His dark eyes pinned her. "Most people travel with a destination in mind." "I did," Lily said, her voice rough with unshed tears. "Until this morning, my uncle stole my inheritance. I got evicted, and my phone died. Denver was just the next cheapest flight." She hadn't meant to say any of it. It just spilled out. The blunt, ugly truth. Matteo watched her, his expression unreadable. He was used to liars, to flatterers, to people who wanted something. This girl, with her disastrous, artless honesty, was a puzzle. He found himself amused. "A bad day," he summarized. Lily let out a noise that was half sob, half laugh. "You could say that." He closed his laptop. The click was sharp in the quiet cabin. "Elena will show you to the guest suite. You should freshen up. We will be in the air for another 2 hours." Lily just nodded, overwhelmed. Elena led her to a small, private room at the back of the plane with a bed and a private bathroom. "The shower is fully functional. Miss, we have amenities available. And Mr. Romano thought you might be more comfortable." The attendant opened a drawer, revealing a set of clothes still in their wrapping, a simple set of black lounge pants and a soft cashmere sweater, and a robe, thick and white. "Thank you," Lily murmured. She locked the door, stripped off her damp, cold clothes, and stepped into the shower. The hot water was a shock, and she stood under it until her skin was red, washing away the grit and the grief of the day. She changed into the pants and sweater. They were impossibly soft. She was brushing her fingers through her tangled, damp hair when she opened the bathroom door. She paused in the doorway, the thick white robe clutched in her hands. Her bare feet on the carpet, Mateo was walking down the cabin's hallway, perhaps to get a drink. He stopped when he saw her. She was framed in the light of the doorway. The severe black clothes he'd provided somehow made her look softer, smaller. Her face was scrubbed clean, pale save for the red of her lips, and her damp hair curled around her neck. He saw the vulnerable line of her throat, the slimness of her ankle. His eyes lingered for a second too long. A strange, unfamiliar heat coiled low in his stomach. It was an immediate, unwelcome, and profoundly complicating sensation. Mateo turned away, his movement sharp. He faced the bulkhead, his jaw clenching. He, who was defined by his control, felt it slip. This was a girl, not a woman, a stray. He was surprised and angered by his own restraint. It was an effort to keep his back to her. "We will be landing soon," he said. His voice clipped, later, as darkness filled the cabin. Lily tried to sleep in the armchair. She didn't want to presume by using the guest room again. The flight had been smooth, but as they began their descent over the Atlantic, the plane suddenly lurched. It dropped, a sickening, weightless feeling, followed by a violent shake. The sound of groaning metal filled the cabin. Lily's breath hitched. She wasn't just scared. She was gripped by a primal, paralyzing panic. This was it. After surviving the worst day of her life, she was going to die in a storm, in a stranger's plane. Her hands gripped the armrests, her knuckles turning white. A silent scream trapped in her throat. Mateo was unbuckled and moving before he even registered a conscious thought. The turbulence didn't bother him. Her fear did. It was a palpable thing in the cabin, a scent of ozone and panic. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and sat in the chair directly opposite her, his knees almost touching hers. "It's just air," he said, his voice, though low, cut through the noise of the engines and the storm. Lily's wide, terrified eyes locked on his. She was shaking her head, unable to breathe. "The plane is built for this. It's fine." Another jolt shook the cabin. A small cry escaped her. Mateo reached across the small space and covered her white-knuckled hand with his own. His hand was huge, heavy, and impossibly warm. His grip was firm, not gentle, but steady. A rock in the middle of her terror. "Breathe," he commanded. She stared at their hands. Hers, pale and trembling, his dark, anchored, inescapable. She inhaled, a ragged, shuddering breath. He just held on, his dark eyes never leaving her face, his expression unreadable, until the plane stabilized, finding smoother air. The immediate danger passed, but the tension remained. He hadn't moved his hand. She was still shaking, the adrenaline of the panic giving way to the bone-deep exhaustion of the day, the grief, the eviction, the fear. It all crashed down on her. Without thinking, driven by a need for solid ground, she unbuckled, moved from her chair, and slid onto the small couch built into the wall beside his seat. And then, in a moment of total emotional surrender, she rested her head on his shoulder. Mateo froze. His entire body went rigid. He did not do this. He did not comfort. He did not touch. His associates, his family, even the women he occasionally spent time with, none were allowed this close into his personal space without an invitation. He could feel the fine tremor running through her. He could smell her hair, the clean, simple scent of the shampoo from his own jet. He felt the rise and fall of her chest as she took a shaky breath. His first instinct was to pull away, to put her back in her seat, but the arm she was leaning against, it felt heavy, rooted. He stared into the darkness of the cabin, at the blinking lights on the wing, and did not move. He just sat there, a statue of black cashmere and controlled violence, and listened to her breathe. When the wheels touched down in Miami, the gentle bump woke her. She pulled away from him immediately, her cheeks flushing hot with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she whispered, scrambling back to her seat and buckling the belt, her eyes fixed on her own lap. Mateo just inclined his head, his expression as closed as it had been at the airport. "We are here." A black sedan was waiting for them on the tarmac, right at the steps of the jet. There was no terminal, no customs, just the warm, humid Miami night air and the quiet efficiency of his men. The ride to the hotel was silent. Lily stared out the window at the palm trees, her mind a blank slate of confusion. What was she supposed to do now? They didn't go through a lobby. They used a private elevator that opened directly into a sprawling penthouse suite. It was all glass and white marble, overlooking the ocean. Mateo walked to a set of large, lacquered double doors and opened one. Marco, who had appeared as if from nowhere, handed Lily a plastic keycard. "This is your room," Mateo said. He gestured to the open door. "My suite is here." Lily looked at the keycard, then at the door, then at the adjoining doors that were clearly visible from where she stood. Next to his suite. Her stomach tightened. The transaction. This was it. This was the price for the flight. She started, her voice shaking. "Mr. Romano, I'm very grateful, but I can't pay you back for this." He turned. The moonlight from the window hit his face, throwing his harsh features into shadow. He studied her for a long, heavy moment. "I'm not asking you to," he said, his voice soft, almost rough. "I don't conduct business in my home." He paused. "Rest. Elena has stocked the room. We will talk in the morning." He turned and walked into his own suite, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving her alone in the massive hallway. Lily fumbled with the keycard, her hands still shaking. She entered the room. It was bigger than her entire Chicago apartment. A wall of glass looked out over the black, breathing ocean. She walked to the mirror, her reflection a pale ghost in the expensive glass. She was in Miami. She was in a stranger's hotel room, a powerful, dangerous stranger. She remembered the turbulence, the feel of his hand, steady and warm on hers, his voice, cutting through her panic. "Breathe." Almost unconsciously, her fingers drifted up. She touched her own lips, as if trying to remember the sound, across the wall, in the darkness of his own suite. Mateo Romano stood at the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had business to attend to. He had calls to make. But he didn't move. He rubbed a thumb over his own mouth, the annoyance returning, stronger this time. He could still feel the phantom weight of her head on his shoulder, still smell the rain and the soap in her hair. He took a long drink. The girl was a complication he had not anticipated, and he had no idea what he was going to do with her. Lily woke to silence, which was more alarming than noise, in her old apartment. Morning was a symphony of garbage trucks, distant sirens, and the neighbors' arguments. Here. The only sound was the hushed, engineered whisper of the air conditioning. She was lying in the center of a bed larger than her entire childhood bedroom, buried in sheets so white and soft they felt like cool water. For a disorienting second, she had no idea where she was. Then the memory of the airport, the rain, and the dark. Imposing man named Mateo rushed back in. A soft knock. 3 precise taps sounded at the door. Lily scrambled out of bed, clutching the black cashmere sweater and pants provided by the jet's attendant. "Just a minute." She opened the door a crack. It was the same severe, gray-haired woman from the plane, Elena. She stood behind a gleaming silver trolley. "Good morning, miss," Elena said, her voice a flat, professional monotone. "Mr. Romano requested I bring you breakfast." "Oh," Lily said, her voice small. You don't have to." Elena's expression did not change, but she nudged the trolley forward. "Where would you like it?" Defeated. Lily opened the door. Elena wheeled the cart in, stopping by the wall of windows that overlooked the ocean. With a practiced flourish, she lifted 3 silver cloches. One revealed a perfect golden omelet. Another held fresh tropical fruits, sliced with geometric precision. A third held pastries that looked like jewels. There was a pot of coffee, a pitcher of juice, and a single, perfect white rose in a crystal vase. Lily stared. This was not breakfast. This was a display. It was more food, and more expensive food, than she sometimes ate in 3 days. Is there anything else? Miss? No, thank you. This is too much. Mister, Romano is very particular, Elena said, which seemed to explain everything and nothing. She smoothed her apron and left, closing the door with a quiet, heavy click. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the feast. She felt like an imposter. She was a waitress. She was used to serving this kind of meal, not eating it. She was overwhelmed by the sheer, casual, mind-boggling expense of it all. It felt like a trap, like every bite was adding to an invisible debt she could never hope to repay. An hour later, her room phone buzzed. She jumped. She picked it up. Hello? You are awake, Matteo's voice. That deep, rumbling baritone. No greeting, just a statement of fact. Yes, thank you for the breakfast. The beach is private, he said, ignoring her thanks. The sun is out. I am going for a walk. Join me. It was not an invitation. It was a summons. I don't have anything, she stammered. A swimsuit or... Look in the closet, he said. And the line went dead. She opened the closet. Her stomach twisted. It was full. Not with her clothes, but with new clothes. Dresses, linen pants, sandals, a few bathing suits, all high-end labels she only knew from magazines. All mysteriously in her size. The black lounge set had not been an anomaly. It was an introduction. He was dressing her. The thought made her feel both cared for and possessed. She bypassed the swimsuits, her skin prickling at the intimacy of it. She chose the simplest thing she could find, a loose, pale yellow sundress that fell to her knees. It felt soft and breezy. She brushed her fingers through her hair, left her feet bare, and walked out of her room. He was waiting in the main area of the suite, by the open glass doors leading to the balcony. He was not in a suit. He wore dark linen pants rolled at the cuffs, and a black Henley shirt that stretched across his shoulders. He looked less like a businessman and more like a predator on vacation. His eyes swept over her. They started at her bare feet on the cool marble, traveled up the line of her legs, paused on the simple dress, and finally met her eyes. The look was not lecherous. It was appreciative, possessive. It lingered a half-second too long, and she felt a strange liquid heat pool low in her stomach. He covered the intensity with a tone that was almost playful, though it sounded strained on him. Yellow, he said, one side of his mouth ticking up. A bold choice. It was either this or a bikini, she retorted, surprising herself. The faint smile vanished, replaced by that dark intensity. This is better. They took the private elevator down to the beach. It was, as he'd said, private. A pristine curve of white sand, empty of people, bordered by stone walls and the turquoise ocean. Two men in dark polos, the same stone-faced bodyguards from the airport, stood at a discreet distance. Near the path, they walked toward the water, the silence thick. The sand was warm, like sugar, under her feet. You're not used to nice things, he observed. Lily flinched. Is it that obvious? You looked at the breakfast like it might bite you. I'm not used to people spending money on me. I'm used to working for it. She gestured to the sky, the ocean, the hotel. This feels like borrowing something I can't afford. They walked on, and he didn't reply, just watched the water. The silence pressed on her, and suddenly, she needed to fill it. She needed him to know she was not just some stray. I had plans, she said, her voice quiet. Before all this, my mom and we were going to open a little cafe. She had these amazing recipes, old family ones, and I was saving. She found herself telling him about her mother, about the long, grueling 2 years of her illness, the stacks of medical bills, about her dream of a little place with mismatched chairs and the smell of good coffee, and then about her uncle, how he had handled the estate, how he had smiled at her at the funeral, and how the lawyer, just yesterday, had told her it was all gone, every cent. I trusted him, she whispered, stopping near the waves. He was family. I can't believe I was that stupid, to trust the wrong person. Matteo had not spoken. He had not nodded or offered a single word of sympathy. He just listened, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon. He was unusually, unnervingly quiet. When she finally ran out of words, he turned to face her. He took everything. Everything. The apartment, the money. All I have is in that duffel bag. Mateo stared at her, his expression hard to read. It wasn't pity. It was something colder, calculating. Just then, a phone buzzed. Not hers, his. He pulled it from his pocket, his face darkening. I have to take this. He started to walk away, toward his guards. Stay here. Do not move. He walked about 20 yards down the beach, turning his back to her, his voice dropping into a low, harsh cadence. Lily watched him go, feeling exposed. She turned back to the ocean, pulling her arms around herself. The sun was hot, but she felt a chill. Beautiful day, isn't it? Lily jumped. A man was approaching her from the surf line. He was not one of the guards. He was dressed in swim trunks and a tight, garish t-shirt, and his smile was all teeth. You look a little lost, he said, stepping closer. He was too tan, and his eyes were covered by mirrored sunglasses. I'm fine, Lily said, taking a step back. Are you sure? You look like you need a friend. Maybe I can buy you a drink. He reached out, his hand aiming for her arm. No, thank you. She took another step back, her heart hammering, before the man's fingers could even brush her skin. A shadow fell over them. It happened so fast. Lily didn't even see the approach. 1 second the man was smiling. The next, Marco, the bodyguard from the airport, was between them. He didn't touch the man. He didn't have to. He was simply there. A 400-pound wall of muscle and menace. At the same time, the second guard materialized at Lily's elbow. Miss, the guard said, his voice calm. Mister, Romano is waiting for you. Please walk back. The man on the beach froze. His slick smile faltered. Hey, man, I was just talking to the lady. Marco just stared at him. He didn't speak. He just looked. The man's bravado evaporated. Right, okay. Have a nice day. He turned and half walked, half jogged, back the way he came. Lily was shaking. The guard gently, but firmly, guided her back toward Mateo. Mateo had finished his call. He was watching her, his face a mask of cold fury. What did he want? He asked as she reached him. He just wanted to buy me a drink. Did he touch you? The question was sharp, like a blade. No, your man. He stopped him. Mateo looked at Marco, who gave a single, imperceptible nod. Mateo's jaw clenched, but the fury seemed to recede, replaced by that cold, controlled mask. He looked at Lily, at her pale face and trembling hands. You see now, he said, his voice quiet. My world is not safe. You do not talk to strangers. That night, she couldn't settle. The luxury of the room felt like a cage. She'd eaten dinner with him, a tense, mostly silent affair in the penthouse dining room, but the incident on the beach had broken something. The illusion of safety, the pretense that this was a simple, kind gesture. She found him on the main balcony. He was standing at the glass railing, a glass of dark red wine in his hand, staring out at the Miami skyline. She walked out and stood several feet away. Who are you? Really? He didn't turn. I am the man who offered you a seat on his jet. Don't, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Don't avoid the question. Those men today, the way they moved, the way that man looked at your guard. He was terrified. You're not just a businessman. He was silent for a long moment. Then he turned. The moonlight caught the harsh planes of his face. I am someone who has done bad things, he said, his voice low and devoid of apology. But not to you. Never to you. The honesty of it, the cold vow, hit her harder than a lie would have. Why? She whispered, moving closer. Why me? Why bring me here? What do you want from me? He set his wine glass on the railing. I want you to be honest with me. Why did you bring me? Not the I don't know from the airport. I want the truth. He watched her, his eyes dark. That was the truth. I don't know why. I saw you. You were... He searched for the word. You were finished. and I didn't want to leave you there." The admission hung in the warm, humid air between them. He had done it on an impulse, a whim, and now they were both trapped in the consequences. Chemistry crackled, sharp and dangerous as lightning. He poured a second glass of wine from the bottle on the table and held it out. Her fingers brushed his as she took it. A jolt. She moved to the railing, turning her back to him, looking out at the city. "It's beautiful. It's just lights," he said. He moved. She didn't see him, but she felt him. He stepped behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He was caging her in, his arms resting on the railing on either side of her. "You're not afraid of heights," he murmured. His voice was right by her ear. His breath, warm and smelling of wine, brushed the skin of her neck. A shiver traced its way down her entire spine. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird, he moved closer. His chest brushed her back. His hand moved from the railing, his fingers lightly, almost accidentally, grazing her hip. "Matteo," she breathed. Half warning, half invitation. He lowered his head, his lips near her temple. She could feel the tension rolling off him, a tightly coiled power that was both terrifying and magnetic. He was going to kiss her. She knew it. She turned her head. It was a mistake, or perhaps exactly what he wanted. Her face was now angled toward his. Their lips were millimeters apart. She could see the individual flecks of brown in his dark eyes. She could smell the sandalwood and the wine. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He didn't move. He waited. He was letting her make the choice. But the air was so thick. She couldn't breathe. She pulled away. She spun out from under his arm, putting a foot of space between them. "I can't." Her voice was a hoarse whisper. I'm not ready." Matteo looked at her, his eyes burning, his chest rising and falling. His hands on the railing were clenched into fists. He had been denied, and he was not a man who was used to being denied. But then, the tension in his shoulders eased. The predator receded. He nodded, his jaw tight. "Then I'll wait," he replied, his voice low and rough. They went inside. The air conditioning was a shock after the humidity on the balcony. The tension was still there, a live wire between them. She didn't go to her room. He didn't go to his. They sat on the same massive white couch. She sat on one end, he sat on the other, then he shifted, moving to the center. She stayed where she was. He leaned back, draping his arm over the back of the couch, his hand just behind her head. It was a casual, possessive gesture. It wasn't touching her, but it was claiming the space around her. They sat in silence. The ticking of a clock somewhere in the massive room was the only sound. Lily's body was thrumming, the near kiss, the danger on the beach, the exhaustion of her new reality. Her eyelids grew heavy. She fought it. She didn't want to show this man any more weakness, but the couch was soft. The room was quiet. And strangely, sitting next to him, the most dangerous man she had ever met, she felt for the first time in days, safe. Her head nodded. She jolted awake. He was watching her. "Go to sleep, Lily, don't," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I'm fine," she mumbled, but her body betrayed her. She slumped sideways, her head falling onto a throw pillow, her legs still on the floor. She was asleep in seconds. Matteo sat in the darkness, watching her. He watched her for a full 10 minutes. He watched the way her brow furrowed even in sleep, the way her fingers twitched. This was a complication. She was a complication. He stood, his movements careful, and gently lifted her legs, swinging them onto the couch so she was lying down properly. He found a cashmere throw blanket draped over a chair and unfolded it. He carefully, almost clinically, tucked it around her shoulders. He stood over her, watching her chest rise and fall under the blanket. She looked small, innocent. His hand twitched. He wanted to brush the hair from her face. He wanted to feel the softness of her skin, to see if she was as breakable as she looked. He clenched his fist at his side. He turned, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached, and walked away from her, out onto the balcony, needing the night air to clear his head. Lily woke with a crick in her neck. The cashmere throw pilled in her lap. She was still on the couch. The penthouse was silent, bathed in the pearly, indirect light of a Miami morning. Mateo was gone. She sat up, her hair a mess, her body stiff. She felt foolish, like a child who had fallen asleep at a party. As she padded back to her room, she saw Elena, the housekeeper, already in the main suite, clearing away 2 wine glasses and the bottle from the balcony. Elena nodded. "Good morning, miss." "Good morning," Lily murmured, her cheeks hot. "I'm sorry about I fell asleep." "Mr. Romano is in his office," Elena said, her hands moving with an efficiency that was almost military. "He said not to disturb you. More breakfast." "No," Lily said, maybe too quickly. "No, thank you. Can I help?" Elena paused in the act of stacking a plate. She looked at Lily, really looked at her. For the first time, the professional mask softened by a fraction. "Mr. Romano does not have guests who help." "I'm not a guest," Lily said, the words tasting strange. I don't know what I am." Elena gave a small, dry smile. She leaned a little closer. "I have worked for Mr. Romano for 9 years. In all that time, he has never brought a woman here." She tapped the adjoining door to Lily's room. "Not like this. Not to the residence." Lily's heart did a strange, small flip. "Oh, he is a precise man." Elena finished, as if that explained everything. "Your clothes are in the closet, the black ones from the jet. I've had them laundered." While Lily showered, Mateo was, in fact, in his office. It was a separate room, down a hall, soundproofed and sterile. He was on the phone, his voice a flat, cold instrument. "The uncle's name is Arthur Hart," he said, staring not at the ocean but at a blank white wall. "He's in New York, a small-time real estate lawyer. He embezzled his niece's inheritance. I want a full workup, accounts, debts, habits. I want to know what he eats for breakfast and who he sleeps with." He listened for a moment. "I don't care about the how. Find out who he hurt, and, Marco, I want that inheritance back, to the dollar." He hung up without saying goodbye. Lily, feeling restless and profoundly out of place, found herself wandering the massive suite. She had no money, no phone, nowhere to go. She was a prisoner in a palace, cared for by a man who was equal parts terror and tenderness. She drifted, her bare feet silent on the cool marble. She passed his office, heard the faint, angry murmur of his voice, and hurried on. She found herself in his bedroom. The armchair was back in its corner. The bed was already made, the sheets crisp, betraying no sign that she had slept there. It was as impersonal as a hotel room, save for one thing. On his desk, pushed to the side, was a simple, silver-plated frame. It was not on display. It was almost hidden, lying flat among a neat stack of papers. She picked it up. The photo was old, faded at the edges. 2 boys, teenagers, stood on a dock, a blurry lake behind them. They both had the same dark hair, the same strong nose. One, she recognized instantly. It was Mateo, maybe 17. He was not smiling, he was just less hard, less guarded. His eyes clear and intense, but not yet cold. The other boy had his arm slung around Mateo's neck. He was laughing, a wide, joyful, trouble-making grin. He was the light to Mateo's shadow. "That is not your space." Lily's heart leapt into her throat. She spun, the frame clutched to her chest. Mateo stood in the doorway, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He was not in a good mood. His eyes were like chips of ice. I'm sorry," she stammered, putting the photo down. I didn't mean to." His anger was a physical presence in the room. He walked toward the desk, his gaze fixed on her. But when he saw what she was holding, the anger didn't explode. It deflated. It left him, replaced by a weariness so profound it seemed to pull at his shoulders. "Who is he?" she whispered, unable to stop herself. Mateo picked up the frame, his thumb brushing over the glass. His voice, when it came, was rough. "My brother." He didn't say was, he said is. "Paolo," he said, the name sounding foreign in the sterile room. "My younger brother. He looks happy." Mateo finished. He was always happy, too loud, too trusting. He set the photo down. He died, a car accident, 10 years ago. The way he said car accident was the same way he said businessman, a clean, simple word to cover a dark, complicated truth. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. She knew what it was to lose the one person who made sense. He just nodded, his jaw tight, and looked out the window, the shared, unspoken grief, the sudden, jagged piece of his own history, had changed the air between them. The tension had not left, but it had shifted. It was no longer just predator and prey. He turned back to her, his eyes unreadable. "The hotel has a rooftop pool. Private. The sun is hot today." He was changing the subject. He was offering a truce. She nodded. "Okay, yes, the pool sounds nice." The swimsuit she chose was a deep, midnight blue one-piece. It was elegant and modest, but it clung to her in a way that made her feel exposed. She wrapped one of the hotel's thick white robes around herself and met him by the elevator. He was just in dark swim trunks, a towel slung over his shoulder. His body was a surprise. She'd seen him in suits, in expensive shirts. She had seen the map of scars. But here, in the bright sunlight, he was lean, powerful, and corded with muscle, not the bulky, showy muscle of a gym, but the dense, functional strength of a fighter. The rooftop pool was an oasis, a sheet of impossible blue water surrounded by white loungers and glass walls that overlooked the ocean, and it was empty. He dove in, a clean, powerful slice into the water, and surfaced in the middle. He treaded water, his black hair slicked back, and watched her. Lily dropped her robe, her skin prickling. She felt pale and small. She walked to the shallow end and sat on the steps, just letting the cool water lap at her ankles. "You're going to burn," he called, his voice echoing slightly. "I'm fine here. The water is better." She sighed and slid in. The water was a shock, cool and silky. She swam a few strokes, staying in the shallow end, acutely aware of him watching her. The silence, broken only by the sound of lapping water, stretched. She felt stiff, awkward, like a doll he had put in his dollhouse. She had to do something, on an impulse, one that was so unlike her. She cupped her hand, scooped up a small splash of water, and flicked it at him. It was a pathetic, silly gesture. Most of it landed 5 feet short. He stopped treading water. He just stared at her, his expression one of pure, blank surprise, as if she had just spoken in a language he had never heard. A nervous giggle bubbled up in her. She did it again, this time putting her shoulder into it. The water splashed his face, and then Lily Hart laughed. It was not the half-sob from the jet. It was not the nervous giggle from a moment ago. It was a real, true, rusty laugh, one that came from her chest and surprised her as much as it did him, the sound of it. It was like a key turning in a lock. Mateo's face changed. The blankness was wiped away, replaced by a dark, intense focus. He was captivated. He moved. He didn't swim. He prowled through the water, a dark shape moving toward her with alarming speed. She shrieked, her laugh turning into a gasp, and tried to swim away, but she was clumsy, splashing. He was on her in a second, his hands clamped onto her waist. "No, wait, I'm sorry." She laughed, pushing at his shoulders. He said nothing. He just smiled. It was not his faint, controlled smirk. It was a real, devastating smile, one that lit his dark eyes, and he lifted her. He lifted her straight out of the water, her body light as a feather in his arms. He spun her around. "Mateo, put me down!" she shrieked, her hands flying to his neck to steady herself, her laughter echoing off the glass walls. He spun her again, the world a blur of blue sky and bluer water, and then he let her slide down his body, her feet touching the bottom. But he didn't let go. The laughter died in her throat. The game was over. They stood in the shallow end, her hands still clinging to his neck. His hands locked on her waist. Her legs were brushing against his, the water moving in soft, intimate currents between them. The air went thick. The playfulness vanished, consumed by a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. His eyes, they were burning. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was looking at her, at her mouth, with a hunger that was raw and terrifying. He took a step, and she took one back, until her back hit the smooth tile wall of the pool. He caged her in, his body pressing against hers, the water sluicing between them. "Lily," he breathed, his voice a low growl. His hand slid from her waist, one moving up her back, the other tangling in her wet hair, tilting her head. He was going to kiss her. Here, in the daylight. He was going to take her mouth. She could feel his heart hammering against her ribs. She closed her eyes, and then she trembled. It was not a shiver of passion. It was a small, involuntary tremor of fear, a deep, cold memory of the man on the beach, of her uncle's betrayal, of being small and powerless. He felt it, the inaudible, invisible no. It was like a physical blow. Mateo's jaw clenched, the fire in his eyes went out, replaced by a cold, sharp self-loathing. He had scared her. He, who had vowed to do her no harm, had scared her. He pushed off the wall, his movement abrupt. He put a foot of space between them, then another. He turned his back to her, bracing his hands on the pool's edge, his head bowed. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it. He didn't look at her. He just stayed there, breathing, as if trying to get himself under control. That night, the tension was a third person in the room. They ate dinner in a silence so thick she could barely swallow. She was acutely aware of every move he made, of the way his hand looked holding a fork, of the darkness of his eyes. She retreated to her room as soon as the plates were cleared, but she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, her body thrumming with a strange, nervous energy. She thought of his face in the pool, the raw desire, and then the instant, frustrated restraint. She was thinking of the scars she had glimpsed. She didn't know why she was doing it. She just was. She slipped out of her bed, her feet bare on the cold floor. She crossed her room and opened the adjoining door, which she had left unlocked. His suite was dark, save for the blue-white light of the moon coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She padded across the marble, toward his bedroom. The door was ajar. A single lamp was on, casting a pool of gold light by the window, and he was standing there, his back to her, looking out at the ocean. He was shirtless. Her breath caught. His back was a roadmap of his life, a life of violence. She saw old, silvery white lines, reminders of blades. She saw two puckered, round scars on his left shoulder blade, small and neat, bullet holes, a long, wicked-looking scar, less faded than the others, curved from his ribs around toward his stomach. He was not the polished, perfect man in the suit. He was a damaged, dangerous thing. "I can feel you staring. Lily." He didn't turn around. His voice was quiet, resigned. She should have run. She should have gone back to her room and locked the door. Instead, she stepped inside. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." He turned. The scars continued. A pale, thin line disappeared under the waistband of his pants. Another, older and whiter, slashed across his collarbone. He watched her, his expression not angry, but curious, waiting. "You're not afraid?" he asked. It was a genuine question. Lily looked at the scars, the brutal story written on his skin. Then she lifted her gaze to his eyes. "Of them?" she asked, her voice a whisper, gesturing to his chest. "No." She took a step closer. "Of you?" "No." She didn't know if it was true, but she said it. She was close enough to touch him now. He stood rigid, a statue of scarred marble, watching her. Her hand lifted, her fingers trembling. She reached out and, so gently, traced the long, silvery scar that curved over his ribs. His skin was hot. The moment her fingers made contact, a violent shiver ran through his entire body. He hissed in a breath. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was not hard, but it was absolute, an iron cage, gentle but inescapable. His eyes were burning, all the banked-down fire from the pool roaring back to life. "You don't know what I've done," he whispered, his voice raw, desperate. He was warning her. He was telling her what he was. But Lily didn't pull away. She met his gaze, her own wrist still in his grasp. Her free hand came up, and she pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. It was hammering against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. That was what broke him. He let go of her wrist, but it was only to tangle that hand in her hair, cupping the back of her head, his other arm snaked around her waist, yanking her flush against his bare skin. It was a shock. His heat, his hardness. He crashed his mouth down on hers. It was not the near kiss on the balcony. This was not a question. It was a statement. It was a claiming. It was desperate and hungry and raw, a drowning man's first breath. He kissed her like he was starving, and she was the only food in the world, and she kissed him back. A small sound, half sob, half moan, was torn from her throat. Her fingers curled into his hair, pulling him closer. Her other hand splayed on his back, feeling the ridges of his scars. He tasted of wine and darkness and a power that terrified and thrilled her. She breathed him in, her body melting against his. The kiss deepened. It was slow, then fast, then slow again, exploring. His lips were firm, hers were soft. His hand moved from her hair to her jaw, to her throat, his thumb tracing the line of her pulse, which was rabbiting under his touch. She was the one who broke it. She pushed against his chest, her breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Her forehead rested against his skin. He let her go instantly. Though his hands lingered on her waist, he was breathing just as hard, his eyes dazed, his lips full and dark. "I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't. I don't want to be a distraction. You have all this. Your world. I'm nothing." He put a finger under her chin, his touch surprisingly gentle, and forced her to look at him. His eyes were clear, the passion banked but not gone, replaced by a terrifying, sudden certainty. "You're not a distraction, Lily," he said, his voice a low vibration she felt in her bones. "You're the only thing that makes sense." The words hung in the air, more intimate than the kiss. He saw the exhaustion in her, the emotional overload of the day. He stepped back, putting a small, respectful space between them. He gestured to his bed, the one she had slept in the night before. "Sleep. No, I'll go to my room," she stammered. "Sleep here," he commanded, but the words were soft. "I will be nearby." She was too tired, too emotionally shattered to argue. She was still in the clothes she'd worn to the pool, her hair damp. She climbed onto the massive bed, under the covers. It already smelled like him. He turned off the main light, leaving only the moonlight from the window. He pulled the heavy leather armchair from the corner, angled it to face both the bed and the door, and sat down. Lily watched him through her eyelashes, a dark, powerful silhouette in the shadows. He was her captor, her guardian, her confusion. She fell asleep in his bed, fully clothed, while he watched over her. Lily woke up in his bed, alone. The sheets where he should have been were cool, but the heavy leather armchair was back in its place, angled toward the bed, exactly as it had been the night before. He had watched her sleep again, but this time, it was after she had fallen asleep in his arms. A new, strange energy hummed under her skin. The kiss had changed the air, thickening it, charging it with an unspoken question. She found him in his office. The door, usually closed, was open a crack. He was on the phone, but his voice was not the low, rumbling baritone she was used to. It was a different sound entirely, a flat, cold blade of a voice. "I am on my way to New York tonight," he said. "Have the jet fueled, and Marco. I want him in a room, quietly. No, I don't care about his gambling debts. I care about her money. Find it." Lily's blood went cold. Her money. He was talking about her uncle. He hung up and looked up, his eyes finding her in the doorway. He was not the man who had held her wrist, or the man who had almost kissed her on the balcony. This was the man who ran the world. "You're leaving," she said. It was not a question. "I have business," he said. He stood, shrugging on a suit jacket. "My uncle," she said. He froze, his hands still on his lapels. "It is not your concern." "Not my concern. You're going to New York. Are you going to hurt him?" "I'm going to get back what is yours," he said, his voice clipped. "I don't want you to," she said, stepping into the room. "I don't want you to do bad things. For me." He looked at her, and the coldness in his eyes was replaced by a flash of that dark, possessive heat from the pool. "You're not—" "What?" "You are not the distraction, Lily," he said, his voice low, as if repeating what she had said. "You are the only thing that makes sense, which is why this is necessary." He stepped past her. "I'm handling this. Stay in the suite. Do not leave. Elena will bring you food. Marco will be outside the door." He was not asking. He was commanding. He was locking her in. "You can't just cage me," she said, her voice rising. The fear and confusion of the last 3 days were suddenly crystallizing into a new, hot feeling. Anger. "I can," he said, turning at the main door. It's for your safety. I will be back tomorrow." He left. The door to the penthouse clicked shut, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoing in the massive room. She was alone. Truly. Properly. Alone. She paced for hours. The suite, once a palace of wonder, was now a gilded cage. She looked at the art on the walls, at the white marble floors. It was all his. She was his. The thought made her skin crawl. She was angry. At him. For leaving. At him. For treating her like a piece of property to be protected. She was angry at her uncle for starting this. And she was angry at herself for being the girl in the airport, the one who was too weak to say no. She had to get out. She couldn't breathe. She stormed to the door and pulled it open. Marco was there, in his usual dark suit, his face impassive. "Miss Hart," he said, blocking the way. "Mr. Romano's orders were clear." "I am going to the spa," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm not leaving the hotel. I'm going to the spa on the 5th floor. You can walk me there, but I'm not staying in this room another second." Marco looked pained. He was a soldier, not a babysitter. He weighed the options. "The spa. Yes, or the pool, or the lobby. I don't care. I'm going out." He sighed, a sound of profound defeat. "The spa. I will wait outside the changing room." It was a small, pathetic victory, but it was hers. She changed into the white robe from her room and grabbed a small, new phone Elena had given her, in case of emergencies. Marco walked with her, a silent, looming shadow, to the private elevator. They descended to the 5th floor. The spa was all sandalwood and soft music. Lily walked to the heavy wooden door marked Women. She turned to Marco. "I assume you're not following me in here." He looked, for the first time, uncomfortable. "I will be right here, miss." She stepped inside. The locker room was empty, all soft light and steam. She waited. She counted to 100. Her heart was hammering. She was not going to the spa. She found the other door, the one marked Exit to Main Hotel. She slipped through it. She was in a normal hotel hallway. She followed the signs to the main elevators. Her hands were shaking. She felt triumphant and terrified. She pressed the button for the lobby. The doors opened. The lobby was a cavern of noise and light, people laughing, music playing. It was life. She walked out the main doors, onto the street. The air was warm, humid, and smelled of exhaust and the sea. She was just standing. A woman in a white hotel robe and slippers, standing on a Miami sidewalk. She didn't care. She was free. It happened in less than 5 seconds. A black van, the kind with no side windows, screeched to a halt at the curb. 2 men got out. They were not smiling. They were not the beachgoer. They were fast. "Miss Hart," one said. Before she could scream, one man had her arms pinned behind her, and the other had a thick, gloved hand clamped over her mouth. "Don't fight. We're just going for a ride." She was bundled into the van. The door slid shut, plunging them into darkness. The panic in the penthouse was cold and immediate. Marco, after waiting a full 10 minutes, had entered the spa, calling her name. He found the open exit. He called Matteo. Matteo was in his seat on the jet, the engine spooling up, when his phone rang. He listened, his face turning from annoyed to cold to a mask of absolute glacial fury. "Turn the plane around," he ordered the pilot. He switched to another line. "Leo, find her phone." Now. The phone she was carrying was not just for emergencies. It was a lifeline. It was a leash. "I have her," Leo reported, his voice tight. "They're moving west. A bungalow. Looks like a known holding location for the cartel." Mateo's knuckles were white. "Nobody," he growled, his voice a low vibration of pure rage, "touches her." Lily was tied to a flimsy wooden chair. Her head was throbbing. The two men were ignoring her. One talking on a phone, his voice tinged with a heavy accent. "Yes, we have her," he was saying. "The girl. Romano's new weakness. We'll see how he negotiates now. Won't we?" The man, Manny, hung up and grinned at her, his teeth yellow. "Your boyfriend is a very powerful man, which means you are a very valuable girl." Lily just stared, her terror a cold, solid block in her chest. The front door did not open. It exploded. It splintered off its hinges, kicked in by a force that shook the whole house. Marco, a giant in the small doorway, was the first one through. He moved left, a second man. Rico drew a gun, but a second shadow was already moving. Mateo was not in a suit. He was in a black t-shirt and dark pants. He was not a businessman. He was a wraith. He moved with a speed that was inhuman. He didn't have a gun. He was the weapon Rico fired. The sound was deafening in the small room, but Mateo was not where he had been. He was on Rico, grabbing the gun hand, and the sound of bone snapping was sharp and wet. Rico screamed. Mateo hit him once, a brutal, efficient chop to the throat. Rico went down, gurgling. Now, Manny was faster. He grabbed Lily, yanking her out of the chair, and pressed a long, glittering knife to her throat. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice high with panic. "Stop or I cut her! I swear to God!" Mateo froze. He was 10 feet away. His chest was heaving, his face a mask of sweat and pure, primal rage. He was breathing like an animal. "Let her go," Mateo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You stop! You back up, or I cut her pretty little neck." Manny pressed the knife. A small, bright bead of blood welled up on Lily's skin. Mateo saw it, and he broke. The calm was gone. The man was gone. He lunged. Manny tried to react, to pull the knife, but Mateo was not after him. He was after the weapon. He grabbed the blade. Lily screamed. He grabbed the razor-sharp edge with his bare hand, his fist closing around it. Manny stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Mateo ignored the blood that was pouring from his own hand. He yanked the knife, pulling it free of Manny's grip, and in the same fluid, horrifying motion, he turned it. Manny didn't even have time to scream. Mateo plunged the knife into his chest. Once. It was not a fight. It was an execution. Manny looked down at the knife, then at Mateo, his mouth a perfect O of surprise. Mateo yanked the blade free and let the man fall. The room was silent, save for Rico's gurgling and Lily's desperate, hitched sobs. Mateo stood over the body of the man he had just killed. He was covered in his own blood and the blood of his enemy. He was shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it seemed to be vibrating him apart. He turned to Lily. She saw him, the blood, the rage, the dead man at his feet. This was the real Mateo, the one who lived in the shadows. She cried, a tear of absolute terror and a tear of gratitude. He crossed the room. He used the bloody knife to saw through the ropes on her wrists. He pulled her up, into his arms. He was still shaking. He buried his face in her hair, his arms like steel bands crushing her to him. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice a raw, broken sound. "You're safe now. I swear it. I have you." The ride back to the penthouse was a silent, vibrating blur. When they stepped into the clean, white marble suite, Lily's legs gave out. She stumbled, not toward the bedroom, but toward the bathroom. She fell into the massive walk-in shower, fumbled for the knob, and turned the water on, hot, scalding. She slid to the tile floor, still in her robe, and wept. She broke down completely. It was not the quiet, grieving sobs from the airport. This was a storm, a raw, animal wail of terror and release. The glass door opened. Mateo was standing there. His hand was wrapped in a blood-soaked towel. His suit was ruined. He was still shaking. He heard her sobs. He saw her, a broken, wet thing on his clean floor. He did not hesitate. He did not ask. He stepped into the shower, fully clothed. The water hit his black suit, plastering it to his skin. He sat on the floor opposite her. "Lily," he said. She just cried. He moved. He sat beside her, his back against the cold tile, and pulled her into his lap. He held her, his arms wrapped around her, his chin resting on the top of her head. He said nothing else. He just held her, a solid, breathing, dangerous anchor, under the pouring hot water, until she had no more tears. Hours later, they were in his bed. Elena had come, had seen the blood, had seen them, and had, with her usual terrifying efficiency, cleaned everything. She had bandaged his hand, which was a deep, gruesome cut. She had brought them dry lounge clothes. Now, the penthouse was dark. The city lights glittered below. Lily was in his arms, her body pressed against his, her head on his chest. She was clinging to him, her fingers tangled in his shirt. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a bone-deep, quivering exhaustion. "They found me because of you," she whispered into the darkness. His arm tightened around her. "Yes, they called me your weakness." He was silent for a long moment. He shifted, turning to look at her in the dim light. They were right. The admission, the vulnerability of it, from this man, was more shocking than the violence had been. She lifted her head. She looked at his face, the hard jaw, the dark eyes, the scar on his collarbone. She looked at his bandaged hand. She kissed him. She pushed herself up, her hands on his shoulders, and pressed her mouth to his. It was not the desperate, hungry kiss from before. This was a choice, a confirmation, an answer. He responded instantly. His good hand came up, tangling in her hair, pulling her down. His other hand, the bandaged one, splayed on her back. The kiss deepened, this time. She didn't stop him. She didn't pull away. She met his hunger with her own, a desperate, sudden need to feel life, to feel him. He moved slowly, reverence warring with a barely leashed intensity. His lips moved from her mouth, to her jaw, to the pulse in her throat. He kissed the small, red mark where the knife had been, a soft, warm breath of a kiss that made her whole body tremble, gently. He eased the cashmere sweater over her head. He stopped, his eyes searching hers, asking the final question. She answered by reaching for the hem of his shirt. He moved over her, a mountain of shadow and heat. He was so careful, his hands holding her face, his gaze searching hers. It was not a joining, but a collision. It was desperate and slow, a reclaiming of life from the edge of death. He was a man made of rough edges and violence, but his touch was reverent. His hands, one of all-encompassing strength, the other a bandaged, brutal reminder of his protection, cradled her body as if she were made of spun glass. He held her hips, her waist, her face, as if memorizing her. She trembled, a sound deep in her throat, a soft moan of his name. He buried his face in her neck, his control finally shattering. In the quiet after, they lay tangled in the sheets. The city was asleep. Lily's head was on his chest, her hand flat over his heart, tracing the scars she could not see. It was beating slow and steady. She whispered into the darkness, "What happens to us now?" He was quiet for a long time. He kissed the top of her head. "Whatever you want." The morning after was not soft. It was sharp, clear, and defined by a new, vibrating tension. The intimacy of the night had not erased the reality of the day. It had only thrown it into starker relief. Lily woke in his bed. He was not there, but she heard him. A low murmur from his office. She showered, dressed in the simple, elegant clothes Elena had provided, and walked out to the main suite. He was standing by the window, already in a dark suit, his bandaged hand a stark white contrast against the black fabric. He was on the phone, and she heard it. "He's in New York," Matteo said. "Good, keep him there. I am delayed, but I will be there in 48 hours to handle the asset." Asset? Her uncle? Lily waited until he hung up. "You're still going." He turned, his face unreadable. "It is my business. It's my business, Matteo. He's my uncle. That was my mother's money, which is why it is being handled, he said, his tone one of finality. He walked to the bar, pouring an espresso. It is done. You don't have to think about it again. No, she said. The word was quiet, but it stopped him cold, his hand frozen on the cup. No, I am not a child. I am not one of your assets, either. You don't get to handle my life. She walked toward him, her hands clenched at her sides. The girl who had cried in the airport was gone. In her place was a woman who had been held at knife point and had survived. You told me. Whatever I want. This is what I want. I want to go to New York. I want to look that man in the face, and I want to get my past back. Matteo stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the steel in her spine. This was not the broken thing he had found. This was the woman he had, in his own dark way. Forged. No, he said, his voice a low growl. He's mine to handle. You will be safe here. I don't want to be safe, she countered, her voice rising. I want to be whole. I need to do this. Matteo, I need to face him, to move forward. Otherwise, I will always be the girl you found at the airport. He studied her, a long, calculating silence stretching between them. He was at war with himself. The instinct to protect her, to lock her in this penthouse, far from the world, was at war with the fierce, sudden pride he felt. She was not weak, and he had made her that way. He is a small, pathetic man, Matteo said, but the world he is in is not my world. It is dangerous. I know, she said, her gaze flickering to his bandaged hand. I've seen it. Take me with you. He let out a breath, a sharp, frustrated sound. He nodded. Once? We leave in an hour. Tight security. You will not leave my sight, not for a second when... Do you understand? I understand, she said. New York was cold, gray and loud. It was a city that did not care about her. Matteo's penthouse here was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking Central Park, darker and more imposing than the one in Miami. The meeting was set for the next day, a small, drab lawyer's office in Queens. Lily walked in, flanked by Marco and Leo, who looked as out of place as two mountains in a dollhouse. Matteo was not with her. He will see you as a child, he had said. Let him. I will be, listening. She walked into the conference room. Her uncle Arthur was there, wearing a cheap suit, his hair slicked down with too much product. He jumped up, his face a mask of false, watery-eyed concern. Lily Bean, he said, coming toward her with open arms. My God, I've been so worried. Your phone was disconnected. The apartment... I didn't know what to think. Lily didn't move. She let him stop, his arms dropping awkwardly. Hello, Arthur. What's this about? Your message was so... formal. And who are these... gentlemen? He gestured nervously at Marco, who was standing by the door, his arms crossed. Where is my mother's money? Arthur. The fake smile vanished, replaced by a practiced, sorrowful expression. Oh, Lily, your mother. Bless her soul. She had so many debts, medical bills, credit cards. I did my best, I really did, but after probate, there was just nothing left. I'm so sorry, dear. He was a terrible liar. He had always been a terrible liar. You're lying, she said, her voice clear and cold in the small room. Now, Lily, he said, his tone shifting to offense. I am your family. I have done nothing but... The door to the adjoining room opened. Matteo stepped inside. He was not in a suit. He was in black trousers and a black shirt, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his bandaged hand visible. He looked like the angel of death, and he had brought hell with him. Arthur Hart's face went white. It was not just pale, it was the color of bleached bone. Who... Arthur stammered. Who is this? Matteo didn't look at Arthur. He looked at Lily. Are you finished? She nodded. Matteo turned his attention to the uncle. He didn't speak. He just walked to the table and dropped a thin, manila folder. He slid it across the table. Arthur stared at it, trembling. I don't... Open it, Matteo commanded, his voice a low, quiet rumble that was more terrifying than a shout. Arthur fumbled with the clasp. He pulled out a photograph, a grainy... Nighttime shot of him handing cash to a bookie outside a bar in Atlantic City. He pulled out another, a bank statement from an account in the Cayman Islands, with a balance of just over $240,000. "Those," Matteo said, "are for the Moretti Casino, your gambling debts, the ones you paid off 2 days after you liquidated your sister's estate." He tapped the second paper. "And that is the rest of it, minus the $10,000 you spent on a woman who is not your wife." Arthur looked like he was going to be sick. Matteo slid a second set of documents across the table. "This is a quitclaim deed, transferring the title of your sister's apartment back to Lily. This is a wire transfer authorization. You will send the full $240,000 to an account I have specified. You will do it now." I can't. This is extortion," Arthur whispered, his eyes wide with panic. "This," Matteo said, leaning forward, "is a Tuesday. You can sign the papers, and you will walk out of here. You will be poor. You will be in debt to very bad men, but you will be alive. Or you can refuse, and you will deal with me." It was not a choice. Arthur, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen, signed every paper. They were on the sidewalk, the gray city noise washing over them. Lily was breathing, really breathing for the first time in weeks. Matteo held out a single, folded document. "The deed. It's yours now," he said. Lily took it, her fingers tracing the legal, binding words. It was over. She looked up at him, at this impossible, dangerous man who had given her back her life. "You didn't have to," she whispered, her throat thick. "The money, I wanted to," he said, his voice rough. He had not done it for the money. He had done it for the look on her face in that moment, that night. The New York penthouse felt different. He was not here just for her business. He was here for his. "I have an event," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "A charity gala, a business necessity." He looked at her. "I do not want to go alone." He had, of course, already thought of a dress. It was hanging in her closet. It was not yellow or blue. It was a deep, impossible shade of emerald green, a silk that slid over her skin like water. When she walked out of the bedroom, he was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned, and he stopped, the man who had faced down kidnappers, who had blackmailed a lawyer into oblivion, who commanded a small army. Stared. She was radiant. The dress clung to her. Her hair was up, her throat bare. She was not the girl in the airport. She was not the woman in the sundress. She was magnificent. "You're staring," she whispered, a small blush rising on her neck. "I am," he said, his voice thick. He walked to her, lifting his bandaged hand, his fingers lightly, so gently, tracing her collarbone. "They will all stare." The gala was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering diamonds, held in a ballroom that looked like it belonged in a palace. The air was thick with perfume and power. Every person in this room, Lily realized, was either someone or worked for someone. And all of them, it seemed, knew Matteo. They parted for him like the Red Sea. Men nodded, respectful. Women watched, their eyes lingering. Matteo's hand was a permanent, heavy, warm weight on the small of her back. He guided her through the crowd, a king in his court, and then one man did not part. He was older, with silver hair and eyes like a reptile. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Matteo," the man said, his voice slick. "It's been too long." "Valenti," Matteo said, his voice dropping a degree. His hand on Lily's back tightened. Don Valenti's gaze slid from Matteo and landed on Lily. It was not an appreciative look. It was an assessing one. He was pricing her, like a piece of art or a racehorse. A new face. Valenti purred. "You did not tell us you were expanding your interests. Romano. Beautiful." He looked back at Matteo. "Or is this a new weakness?" The air went cold. "Don Valenti," Lily said, her voice clear. Both men looked at her, surprised. "Your name is Valenti," she said. "I apologize. I didn't catch it. I'm Lily Hart." She held out her hand as if she were at a garden party. Valenti, thrown by the move, took it. Matteo's body, which had gone rigid as a steel bar, relaxed by a fraction, but the tension was still there. Two of Valenti's men, who had been hovering, stepped closer. From nowhere, Marco and Leo were there, flanking them, a silent, deadly, five-way standoff in the middle of a glittering ballroom. The string quartet seemed to get louder, trying to cover the sudden, icy silence. Matteo stepped forward, his body physically shielding Lily. He was smiling, but it was the smile he had shown her uncle. It was the smile of a shark. "Dawn," Matteo said, his voice a lethal purr. "You are interrupting my evening, and my guests. You are looking well. For now, I suggest you keep it that way. Step back." Valenti's eyes narrowed. He looked at Matteo's hand on Lily's waist. He looked at Marco. He looked at Leo. He was outnumbered. He sneered. "Enjoy your evening, Romano, while you can." He and his men turned and disappeared into the crowd. The elevator ride back to the penthouse was silent. The adrenaline from the confrontation was a metallic taste in Lily's mouth. The second the penthouse door clicked shut behind them, she began to shake. "He called me your weakness. Again," she whispered, turning to him in the foyer. He wanted to hurt you. Through me. You're still in danger. Because of me." Matteo tore his black tie from his neck, his eyes black with an emotion she had never seen before. He crossed the space between them in 2 long strides, backing her against the cold, hard wood of the door. "No," he growled, his voice a ragged, furious sound. He put his hands on the door on either side of her head, caging her in. "I'm not in danger because of you. I'm dangerous because of you." He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers, his breath hot on her skin. "Because for the first time in my goddamn life, I have something to lose." That broke the spell. He kissed her. It was not a kiss. It was a claiming. It was the brutal, desperate, pent-up rage from the gala, the fear from the kidnapping, the longing from every night he had watched her sleep. It was a crash. She answered him with the same desperation. Her hands flew to his hair, pulling him closer. He fumbled for the zipper on her dress, his bandaged hand clumsy, and he growled in frustration. She laughed, a wild, breathless sound, and reached behind her, pulling it down herself. The emerald silk pooled at her feet. He tore his tuxedo jacket off, his shirt next. He swept her up into his arms, his mouth never leaving hers, and carried her from the foyer, through the dark living room, and into the bedroom. He didn't put her on the bed. He pressed her against the wall of windows, the city lights of New York a glittering, cold backdrop. "I need—" He breathed against her neck. "Yes," she whispered, her hands clawing at his back. This was not the tender, emotional joining in Miami. This was not about comfort. This was about possession. It was rough and fast and desperate. It was about adrenaline. It was about surviving. He moved them to the bed, and this time, she took control. She pushed him back onto the crisp white sheets, straddling his hips, meeting his dark, undone gaze with her own. She was his match. She was his weakness. She was his strength. She leaned down, her hair curtaining their faces, and whispered promises against his skin, against the scars. "I'm not going anywhere," she murmured, her voice a low vow. "You're mine. You hear me? Matteo, you are mine." He was undone. His control, the ironclad, brutal thing that defined him, was shattered. He gripped her hips, his fingers digging in, a grounding, bruising, desperate hold, as if she were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. Later, in the quiet, the city was a distant hum. They were tangled, slick with sweat, their breathing slowing. Lily's head was on his chest, her ear over his heart. It was beating, slow and steady. He was staring at the ceiling, his good hand stroking her hair, the bandaged one resting on her back. His voice was a quiet rumble, so low she almost thought she'd imagined it. "I'm thinking of walking away." She lifted her head, propping herself on an elbow to look at him. "From what?" His dark eyes, finally, met hers. The coldness was gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying vulnerability. "From the business, the Bella Vita syndicate, from all of it," he paused. "For you." Walking away from the Bella Vita syndicate was not like quitting a job. It was like severing a limb. Matteo began the process in New York with a cold, quiet precision. He started liquidating assets, transferring ownership, and rerouting chains of command. He was unwinding a decade of deals, handshakes, and blood oaths. It was an empire built on shadows, and every shadow he tried to banish fought back. The first sign of true resistance came not as a threat, but as a plea. Antonio, his father's consigliere, a man with a face like dried leather and eyes that had seen everything, flew in from Chicago. He did not ask for an appointment. He simply appeared in the New York penthouse. Lily, who was reading by the window, felt the temperature in the room drop. "Antonio," Matteo said, his voice flat. He rose from his desk. "Matteo," the old man said. He did not acknowledge Lily, but his eyes catalogued her, weighed her, and dismissed her. "You are making a mistake. I am securing my future." Matteo said. "This is your future," Antonio said, gesturing to the city, to the power. "You are the head of the family. A head cannot just walk away. It dies. Then I will die," Matteo said, his voice cold. Antonio's gaze finally softened, just for a moment. "I held you when you were a child. I watched your father build this. For you. For Paolo." He stepped closer. "You are moving too fast. You are making enemies of friends. They see this." He gestured at Lily, this time with a clear, cold disdain. "And they see weakness. They will not let you step out. They will come for you." "Let them come," Matteo said. "They will not come for you," Antonio said, his voice a low, sad whisper. "They will come for her, and you will have to choose, the family or the woman. You cannot have both." The old man turned and left, a ghost of the old world, leaving a chill in the air. That night, Lily lay beside Matteo in the dark, the city lights a distant, cold glitter. "He's right, isn't he?" she whispered. Matteo was silent, his hand stroking her hair. "I don't want your blood on my hands, Matteo," she said, her voice trembling. "If something happens to you because you're trying to leave, for me—" He turned, his shadow covering her in the dark. He put a finger to her lips, his touch surprisingly gentle. "My hands were never clean, Lily," he said, his voice a low, rough truth. "They were stained long before I met you." He kissed her forehead. "This is not about you staining me. This is about me, for the first time, trying to wash them." The attempt on his life came 2 nights later. They were in a restaurant, a small, outrageously expensive place in Soho. It was the first time they had been out, truly out, in a public place that wasn't a fortress or a gala. It felt normal, too normal. Matteo was telling her about the vineyard he had seen, years ago in Sicily. He was almost smiling, his eyes, for a moment, not filled with shadows, but with sunlight. "It's on a hill," he was saying, "overlooking the sea. The grapes were—" The sound was not a gunshot. It was a crack, like a giant champagne flute shattering, the window beside their table. The thick, reinforced glass exploded inward. Matteo was not a man. He was a reflex. "Down," he roared. He did not duck. He lunged. He grabbed Lily, his arm hooking around her waist like a steel band, and he threw them both backward, off the banquette, onto the floor, behind the solid wood of the table base. A second crack. A bullet punched a hole in the wall where his head had been. Women screamed, men shouted. There was the sound of shattering plates. "Matteo!" Lily cried, her face pressed into the carpet. "He's on the roof, across the street, sniper." Matteo breathed, his voice terrifyingly calm. He was over her, his body a complete shield. "He's reloading. We have 10 seconds. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "When I move, you run. Do not stop. You run for the kitchen. Go." He moved. He was a blur, pulling her up. They scrambled. People were on the floor, crying. Marco and Leo, who'd been at a table by the door, were already moving, guns out, creating a wall of bodies. "To the kitchen, now!" Marco yelled. They ran. A third shot, this one wild, shattered the bar. They burst through the swinging doors into the kitchen, a chaos of steam and shouting chefs. Leo was already at the back, kicking open the steel service door. "The alley, to the car!" They spilled out into the night. The air cold, the armored sedan was there, the engine already running. Leo and Marco shoved them into the back, piled in the front, and the car fishtailed, tires screaming, out of the alley. Lily was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Matteo was on the floor, his body shielding hers, his arms still locked around her. "Betrayal," he said. His voice not a sound, but a vibration of pure, cold rage. Someone from the inside, someone who knew I'd be there. When they got to the penthouse, he was a different person. The man who had talked of vineyards was gone. The boss was back. "Marco," he said, his voice flat. "Pack her bag, just the essentials." "Matteo, no," Lily said, her hands grabbing his shirt. He looked at her, his face a mask of stone. "He sent a sniper, not a warning, a hit. They will not stop. Antonio was right. They came for me, but they will not care if you are in the way." "I don't care. I do," he roared, his voice cracking like a whip, the first time he had ever raised it to her. He was terrified. "You will go. Marco will take you to a house upstate. You will be safe there. I will. Handle this, and then I will come for you." "Matteo, don't do this. Don't send me away," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. He grabbed her face, his bandaged hand and his good one framing her, and he kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of goodbye. It was brutal and short and tasted of fear. "I am doing this for you," he whispered. "Now go, or I will have you carried." She returned the next day. Matteo was in his office, which had become a war room. Maps, phone records, bank statements were spread over his desk. He hadn't slept. He was a man running on pure, black fury. He was hunting the traitor. The door to the office opened. He didn't look up. "I told you. Leo, I don't want... You told me to stay put." His head snapped up. Lily stood in the doorway. She was not crying. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were red, but she was vibrating with an anger that matched his own. Marco stood behind her, looking utterly, miserably defeated. "He wouldn't stop the car," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "So I got out. At a stoplight in the middle of the Bronx, I told him I would scream, and I would run, and he could either shoot me or he could take me back." Matteo just stared. "I am not the girl you hide in a house. Matteo," she said, walking toward him, "I am not the glass you have to protect. I am the woman who was held at knife point, and I am the woman you were shielding at the restaurant. I am with you." She slammed her hand on his desk. "I don't want safety without you. I want you. So stop trying to protect me and start telling me how we're going to fix this." The dark, cold fury in his eyes flickered. It was replaced by a slow, dawning, dangerous light. He looked at her, really looked at her, and he smiled. It was the smile from the pool. "Leo," he said, his voice a low growl. "She's right. Call the traitor. Tell him I'm accepting his terms. The old dockyard, Pier 12, midnight, just me." "Sir," Leo said, his face pale. "That's suicide." "No," Matteo said, his eyes never leaving Lily's. "It's a trap, and they're the ones walking into it." The dockyard smelled of salt, rust, and dead fish. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle. Matteo stood in the center of the pier, a single, dark figure. "This is insane," Lily whispered. She was 100 yards away, in the armored car with Marco, watching through binoculars. "Let the boss work," Marco said, his voice tight. A car approached. 3 men got out. One, she recognized from the gala, he worked for Valenti. The other was Leo. A cry caught in Lily's throat. Leo, the man who had driven them, the man who had been his shadow. "Leo," Matteo said. His voice was not surprised. It was heavy, resigned. "He paid me, boss," Leo said, his gun steady. "He paid me more. Nothing personal. It's always personal, Leo." Matteo said, "Just business. Valenti wants you gone. He wants the New York trade. He wants her." Leo grinned. He was very specific about her. "You shouldn't have said that," Matteo said, and from the darkness, from the shadows of the stacked containers, a single, red laser dot appeared. It landed on the chest of Valenti's man. A pwit! The man dropped. Leo spun, firing wildly into the dark. A second shot. The third man went down. Leo was alone. standing between two dead men. "Rico," Matteo said, his voice calm, "was always a better shot than you." Leo stared, his face a mask of terror. You knew." "I've known for a week," Matteo said. "Your new bank account. It was sloppy." He stepped forward. "The sniper, that was you. You gave the order. You betrayed me. You betrayed her." Leo screamed, a sound of pure rage, and raised his gun. Matteo was faster. He fired once. Leo dropped, his own gun clattering on the wet pavement. It was over. Silence. Matteo stood in the rain, surrounded by death, his gun still raised. "Sir?" It was Rico's voice, from the darkness. "It's done," Matteo said, and then a fourth man. One Lily hadn't seen, one who had been wounded, not killed, rose from the ground. He had a gun. "Matteo!" Lily screamed. She burst from the car, running. Matteo turned. The man fired. The sound was cannon loud in the night. Matteo staggered. He didn't fall. He turned, his gun steady, and fired twice. The man went down, and this time he did not move. Matteo looked down. A dark, spreading stain was blossoming on his stomach. He looked up. At Lily, who was frozen on the pier. He smiled, a strange, small smile, and then he collapsed. She was by his side in a second. "No, no, 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 Matteo, open your eyes." She was holding his head in her lap when he opened his eyes. The light in the hospital room was a sterile, unforgiving white. "Lily," he breathed, his voice a dry rasp. She was crying, her tears dripping onto his face. "You stupid, arrogant, don't you ever," she sobbed. "Don't you ever leave me again." He tried to lift his bandaged hand. She took it, lacing her fingers with his. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. Weeks later, the air smelled of thyme and the sea. The Italian sun was warm, not hot. Matteo was sitting in a chair on a wide, stone terrace, overlooking a sprawling green vineyard that rolled down to the blue, glittering Mediterranean. He was thinner. A new, puckered scar, angry and red, joined the road map on his stomach, but he was alive. He was out. The war had been won. The traitors were dead. Antonio, in a final, quiet meeting, had shaken his hand and let him go. Lily walked out onto the terrace, carrying 2 glasses of wine, the wine they had grown, on this land. She sat on the arm of his chair. He leaned his head against her hip. "It's quiet," he said. "It's perfect," she replied. He took her hand, the one that wasn't holding a glass. He turned it over. "I bought this for you," he said. "The apartment in Chicago, the vineyard, this life. But it's not enough." He looked up at her, his dark eyes clear. The shadows, finally, truly, gone. "I don't want you to be a guest. Lily, not in my jet, not in my house, not in my life." He kissed her knuckles. "I want you to be my future." In the final scene, the jet was the same, the cream leather, the polished mahogany, but this time, Lily was not crying in a damp jacket. She was sitting beside him, her head on his shoulder, not in exhaustion, but in belonging. They were flying. Not to Miami, but home, to the vineyard. He lifted her hand to his lips. He kissed the ring, a simple, elegant diamond that rested on her finger. "This time," he murmured, his voice rough. "You're not alone." She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear, her hand coming up to cup his jaw, feeling the familiar, rough stubble. "Neither are you," she whispered. "Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Matteo and Lily. I would be absolutely thrilled to hear what you thought. Please, let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you loved this, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for more tales of love and danger. And finally, share your thoughts in English so we can all be part of the conversation. What was your favorite part? We cannot wait to read your feedback.